So here's an activity I'd like for you to engage in to help you think about how to build more cultural agility, right? So we've all grown up in a context. Some people have grown up in urban areas, some folks have grown up in rural areas, and others in suburban areas, right? So those places in between. Some of us grew up inside the United States. Some of us grew up outside of the United States. So I want you to look at this particular diagram. And this is a personal assessment. And what I'd like for you to do is to tell me what the people on the left side of this chart taught you about the groups across the top. Right? And so what did parents and family teach or say about groups across the top? What did friends say about the groups across the top? What did a school and workplace teach about the groups across the top? What did TV, movies, and media suggest about the groups across the top? And from your personal experience, what have you learned about those groups across the top? And so the groups are African Americans, European Americans, Latina Americans, Asian Americans, disabled Americans, and Native Americans. So what have the groups on the left taught you about each one of those? But I want you to do this in a particular kind of way. What I'd like for you to do is in the corresponding box, tell me if the group on the left, for example, parents and family, if they taught you something positive about African Americans, put a plus. If they taught you something negative about African Americans, I want you to place a minus. If it was never anything that was discussed or you thought it was a neutral position that they presented to you, I want you to put a 0. Now, you can have pluses and minuses in the same box, in the same quadrant, but the size matters. So a big plus means lots of positive, and a small minus means that you learned a little bit of negative. Right? So pluses, minuses, and zeros. So when some people may ask, well, what time frame are you talking about? I want you to figure out what works for you. So what time frame are you talking about? What context would you like to identify as you do this self-assessment? So pluses, minuses, or zeros. So we'll give a couple of minutes to kind of talk about that or have you explore that starting now. All right, so now that you've done your pluses, your minuses, and your zeros, what I'd like to suggest is that for many of you, there may be thoughts or feelings that came up as you had to go through that process. For some of us, these are things that we've never really thought about. For others of us, it's stuff we think about all the time. But regardless of if you thought about this or not, I don't want you to blame the context that you came from, because what you know or don't know is not your fault, but it is now your responsibility. So when we develop this idea of cultural competence and ultimately cultural agility, what we're recognizing is that things may not be my fault, but now that I am at the age and the ability to be accountable, it is my responsibility.